This podcast is recorded on stolen and unceded Aboriginal land.
We acknowledge the First Nations and elders of this country and join their calls for justice. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land.
The way that people talk about, having people inside the tent is that one of the most obvious things about Mardi Gras was didn't all the major wins at the start of Mardi Gras when it was first born, didn't that happen without any of these people there?
If you want the doll for life, free marijuana, vote Greens.
There's a bunch of ratbags and a bunch of idiots, and I got no time.
The Greens get way too good a run in the Australian media, way too free a run.
Frankly, I've always found the Greens to be a real serious danger.
Uh-oh. Hey, Gabos. This is Serious Danger. I'm allowed to say that. A podcast about green politics in Australia. It is Sunday, the 22nd of February. This is episode 214, if you can believe it. Thanks very much for joining us. This is not an official Greens Party podcast. It's produced by Michael the Griff Griffin. I'm Tom Ballard, coming to you from Naarm on Wurundjeri country. This week, taking a little bit of a break from the insanity of federal politics, if that's okay. And we're going to talk about the Sydney Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras. Happy Mardi Gras. Question mark. The parade is happening next week. There's been a lot going on. You might have been following this. The after party's been cancelled. There's been some spicy stuff happening on the board. We're going to find out what's actually going on, what it means for the left, and how it fits into a bigger conversation about where queer rights are at the moment with all the scary, reactionary, let's say it, fascist politics going on around the place. This is not just a Sydney thing. It's not just for members of the LGBTQ plus community that we're talking about here. I think this has relevance to the whole left-wing movement, our rights to protest, the way institutions try to hang on to power and resist change. There's a lot of really good stuff. I've got a fantastic guest to talk through it all with me. Quickly, thanks to the new Danger Dogs who have joined the family. Hugh, Stuart, TMC, Mina, Mark Fetterplace, Noel, Sam, Melissa, November, Dom, LJK, Janine C, Azalea, Patrick, Xavier, Julian, and Brianna. Thank you so much for going to patreon.com/seriousdangerau for just $3 a month. You get the bonus content. You get to support the show. You get to pay our wages, cover our basic costs. You can sign up for a whole year for $32. You save a bit of money that way, just $32. And you get a whole year's worth of wonderful bonus content. We had a new Patreon episode out this week. Emerald and I were discussing personality politics. Does a politician's personality matter? Should it? What if they're just hot and they're posting photos of them being hot? Is that good? What should the Greens do about it? Should we get better personalities? Really interesting conversation. That was this week's episode. You can hear the full thing if you become a patron. Before we dive in, quick plug for another Victorian Greens gig. I'm sorry, there's going to be a few of these. We're in election year. There is polling showing that One Nation in Victoria is outpolling the Libs. More Greens, please. And so there'll be lots of campaign launches. There will be lots of fundraisers. And I'm taking part in another one. It's called Giggle for Gab. This is for Gabrielle de Vietri, friend of the show, her re-election in the seat of Richmond. It's happening during the Comedy Festival on Thursday, April the 9th at Evie's Bar and Disco. I'm there. Janty Blair is going to be there. Bahaa Dabbagh is going to be there. Very cool guy. Syrian refugee, now doing stand-up comedy. Sammy Petersen, Freddie Arthur. Lots of hilarious jokes, all for a good cause, all raising money to make sure that we re-elect Gabrielle after her massive win last time around. The link for that gig is in the show notes. We'd love to see you there if you're in Naarm. It'll be fun. All right.
Sky News Australia will become News 24.
The new name, which will slowly come into effect, importantly offers the chance to grow an even bigger global audience.
What this shows is it's an investment in news and an investment in journalism and therefore an investment in our democracy.
All right. Sydney Gay and Lesbian Mardi Gras is on right now. The big parade is happening next weekend on Saturday, February 28th. Joining me to discuss it and all the interesting, fascinating politics and the fight for a more radical, just Mardi Gras is returning friend of the show, organiser with the grassroots collective Pride and Protest. She's been involved in the running of Mardi Gras in one way or another since 2013, a former member of the Mardi Gras board, a left-wing extremist who's trying to hijack Mardi Gras and destroy our precious rainbow unity. Charlie Murphy, hello.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on and letting me infiltrate your podcast in order to destroy it from the inside.
Yes, it's entryism. Here we go. Do we still say Happy Mardi Gras? Is that still something we should say?
We still say Happy Mardi Gras. It's still, yeah, we're on the Happy Mardi Gras. No party, but we're still saying Happy Mardi Gras.
We can still be happy in our own way. They can't take that away from us. I was in Sydney this week. I went to see The Normal Heart by Sydney Theatre Company, amazing play by Larry Kramer about fighting the AIDS crisis. Ian Thorpe was in the audience. So I was like, this feels pretty fucking gay and awesome. So
I thought you were about to say he's in the show. I was like, wow, that's special.
No, I think they saw Thorpe's Angels and they said, no acting for you, my friend. But anyway, that all felt good. And it was a good reminder of the incredible legacy of radical queer activism and the way that as a community we've come together and fought for our rights and how that pisses people off a lot sometimes and how the forces that be want to beat that back, which really does speak to the current moment. People might have been following. There's been, yes, some spicy politics going in, some organising within the Mardi Gras world and some stuff that has been bubbling away for quite a while. Seems like it's kind of coming to a head. Just briefly, I know you do this a lot, but can you give us the brief background of Pride and Protest? Starting in 2018, grows out of the No Pride in Detention float and the movement. What was the initial impetus for starting Pride and Protest and what, as an organisation, is it all about?
Yeah, so it's correct that it grew out of that No Pride in Detention float, which primarily focused on refugees who were in offshore and onshore detention, really trying to connect the queer struggle with other struggles of oppressed people. And something that was noticed by activists in Pride and Protest, but by many, many other people, was that people felt that Mardi Gras historically obviously is hugely significant for the advancements of queer rights. But over time, the kinds of groups that we should be actually fighting against and groups that are actively restricting, taking away our rights, had been given a pride of place in Mardi Gras, which papers over those contradictions between those groups, namely groups like the police and the ongoing issues that the police have with many, many communities, queer communities, First Nation communities, multicultural communities, and women. But also groups like, ever since, prime ministers and premiers started showing up to the Mardi Gras, it kind of became obvious that even though there's all these things that need to still be won on a legislative level, the parties, and especially the Labor Party, who were preventing us from actually having those rights, are now taking the opportunity to have Mardi Gras as their photo opportunity. And if people have been paying a little bit of attention to international politics, you would have seen this very starkly with the British Labor Party, because for a long time, British Labor Party members were marching in the prides over there. And at one stage some of those prides made the decisions not to let any politicians march, but really the basis of that decision was on the fact that Labor got into power under Keir Starmer, and then suddenly they've got this Supreme Court ruling, deeply, deeply transphobic society over in the UK, shades of which we're seeing over here now. And there was this uneasy relationship between the fact that people in Labor were marching in these parades, but the harshest and the most transphobic rulings were happening over there. And so those kinds of contradictions are the things that we're pointing out, and we're trying to say, hey, look, like, if these politicians are expected to march, they actually need to be doing what we say instead of the other way around.
Yeah, seems like a pretty reasonable position to me, but hey, what do I know? And also another institution is corporations, right? The corporatization of Mardi Gras, the way that this has just ballooned out to a pretty wild situation in which we have, massive Qantas floats. And once again, I remember seeing Colgate, a massive Colgate float at Mardi Gras one year with Delta Goodrem dancing on the top, I believe. And Pride and Protest, I think, has done some pretty amazing work by saying, hang on, let's actually look at what these companies are doing, what they represent, this massive advertising billboard that we're giving them at our big parade that gets a lot of attention. Shouldn't we ask some questions about that? I remember, Gilead, that was a big fight, right? This pharmaceutical company a couple of years ago. Can you remind us about that one?
Yeah, so Gilead are a pharmaceutical company that were based in the US. And Gilead were a sponsor of Mardi Gras. At the time that they were a sponsor of Mardi Gras, they were the sole manufacturer of PrEP, which is a drug that's used by people to prevent contracting HIV. And as the sole contractor over in the US of manufacturing this drug, they were price gouging it. So for an uninsured American, for them to be able to receive this HIV medication, HIV prevention medication, they would have to pay, I think it was about $1,600 a month US to be able to access it. So, this is a consequence of, a crazy privatization system that in the US especially pushes drug prices incredibly high and affects the ability for us as a community to effectively eliminate HIV and AIDS, something that we in New South Wales have been very successful at doing. But Gilead, in order to pinkwash their reputation, have been going around and still are going around in sponsoring other prides. In fact, I was at Taiwan Pride and Gilead was a sponsor over there just at the end of last year. But when Gilead came to Sydney Mardi Gras, we put up a motion saying we don't want them to be a sponsors based on the fact that they are actively harming our brothers, sisters, and siblings over in the US. And we were successful in passing that motion. We've had another successful motion around how Mardi Gras looks at the corporate sponsors that they take. One in the same year, we passed an ethics charter for Mardi Gras that says that there is a minimum standard that these companies need to meet in order to be accepted by Mardi Gras. And one of those conditions, although it's not always met with Mardi Gras when they're partnering with people, is that companies should not be materially contributing to the genocide in Gaza. And so a number of sponsors have actually been knocked back on the basis that they are BDS. So, our position is no corporate sponsors at all. We'd rather not have to, go, this one did that and that. It's actually like privatization is not good for anyone. We all know they're doing bad things. We don't have to be hyper specific about it. But we have achieved those for those especially egregious companies that have been part of Mardi Gras.
Yeah. I think the connecting struggles point is so important. So no pride in detention. Obviously, there were members of the LGBT community who came to Australia seeking refuge, right? And we know that they were tortured in these horrific camps and their human rights and dignity were contravened and they were fleeing persecution, right? So obviously that connects to the queer community in one way and that is wrong. But it also seems like, yes, we want to key into that sentiment of solidarity and realize that our oppression is connected to and we stand in solidarity with all other people who are experiencing that same kind of discrimination and oppression. And so while some might want something like Mardi Gras to stay in its lane and just focus on certain issues that affect the community, I think Pride and Protest seems to be trying to wake us up and remind us that shouldn't be how politics works. It shouldn't be how progressive people work. We should find as much international solidarity as humanly possible because fuck knows the world needs it right now.
Yeah, and there are people out there that I think actively want to rewrite the history of Mardi Gras when it comes to those things. And this is typical kind of centrist selective
Liberal,
thinking.
small L liberal.
Because when it's meaningful for them, right? When there's things that they want to talk about, for example, things on Ukraine, they're more than willing to speak about it through these organisations. But when there is struggles that makes them feel personally uncomfortable, maybe in their own politics, suddenly it's no, Mardi Gras is only about LGBTQI rights. But Mardi Gras has always been international, particularly with its outlook. I remember in one of the first years that I was working there was a float which was a giant pink tank and a Kim Jong-il impersonator sitting at the top of it. Mardi Gras has never been afraid to use satire as a form of criticism for international issues. And, in the 80s as well, there were radicals that were part of Mardi Gras then holding up banners to do with international issues. So it's always been there. And I think when people talk about the first Mardi Gras only being about that, it is a bit of rewriting history that's happening.
Yeah, totally. Well, Charlie joined us on episode 15 of this podcast back in March 2022. If you want to have a listen to a little bit more about the background of Pride and Protest, I recommend you check that out. But it's been 4 years since then. You've had a bunch of wins, a lot of organising, getting seats on the Mardi Gras board, moving motions, organising. Heaven forbid that anyone would organise to get some political outcomes within the queer community, but that is what's happening. And you've got these wins. And so in response to your success, I would argue, we have this new organisation emerge called Protect Mardi Gras. Who are Protect Mardi Gras and what are they about?
That's a great question.
Thank you so much.
That is a great question, who they are,
Yes.
which is not really entirely clear. It is, well, first let's look at the name Protect Mardi Gras.
Yes.
And I think when people see the term Protect Mardi Gras, the next obvious question is, who is Mardi Gras being protected from?
Yes.
And if we look around at the forces that are happening right now, there are polls coming out saying that One Nation are more popular than the Liberal Party at the moment.
Yep.
You would think that maybe it was groups like, or people like Pauline Hanson, who have actively been putting motions up in the Senate saying that trans women are not women, things like that, kicking us out of sports, all sorts of horrible stuff. But no, in fact, the people that Mardi Gras should be protected from are other queer people because they've been very naughty and they've decided to act democratically within the AGM in a way that they don't like. Yeah. This group is made up of a combination of different people, but in the last election, some of the people who ran under their banner were Labor staffers. A Labor staffer had won. She also won a seat on that. There was also basically a lifelong Liberal member who had worked on many, many campaigns for the Liberal Party across the country. He also won a seat on the board, and then a number of independents. So essentially, the way to conceive of Protect Mardi Gras is a group that is interested in maintaining their relationships with these larger oppressive groups, especially in particular their relationship with the police, but very strongly now their relationship with the Labor Party, because they can see that there has been an increased sense in the community that the police and Labor should be held to account for what they've been doing. So it's a pretty naked attempt from this group to say to the police and to the Labor Party and Liberal Party, don't worry, we are working for you. Don't worry about what the rest of the community are doing with their little activism. We are working for you. We're going to make sure you, Albo, you're in the parade. Chris Minns, you're in the parade. Police, you are definitely in the parade. We're going to keep you there. Corporate sponsors, please don't be scared off. We want to make sure that your cash is still there. That is who their audience is. Their audience is not other queer people. And you can kind of see that. You can kind of see of the fact that Pride and Protest, we're doing stuff all year round, we have a lot of campaigns that we run. We do submissions to anti-discrimination reviews as in the New South Wales Parliament and in federal Parliament. We've run campaigns like trying to get trans women out of male detention facilities. But the thing about Protect Mardi Gras is that they pop up when things are really hot in Mardi Gras, and then they don't say anything else because they're not an actual organisation that is talking or interested about rights. They are specifically here to make sure that in Mardi Gras itself, that those groups are protected. And once they've done that job, they just fuck off.
Yes, well, they've certainly been organising around the AGM last year, which we'll come to in a moment. But yes, and look, there are some folks there involved with the Greens as well. There's a bit of a Greens connection. Peter Stahl, who I believe is involved with Protect Mardi Gras. I've met him once or twice. I know he's done a lot of stuff with the party, so that's there. I'm sure there are people who might be associated with this group that you and I might share, similar political positions on a whole bunch of stuff, but not on this particular front. And I thought it's important to acknowledge, one of the spokespeople for the group is Peter Murphy, who is no relation to you, I assume, who is a 78er, right? And there are some 78ers, that is people who were at the initial Mardi Gras in 1978, who are queer elders, who we have a lot of respect for a whole bunch of reasons, but they are getting involved with Protect Mardi Gras, and being vocal about that. I mean, you were on an episode of 7am, the podcast recently, where they were sort of looking at the two sides of this. It was yourself and Peter giving his thoughts. How do you think about that? The endorsement of some, and of course not all 78ers are a monolith, just like the rest of the queer community, some members of the 78er guard endorsing this and thinking Protect Mardi Gras is worth advocating for.
Yeah, it's really complicated, isn't it? And as you said, there are 78ers that are on that side. There are 78ers that are on front and protest side of things, and also acknowledge that there's a lot of independence as well. People all have different feelings about these things, and so especially at the AGM, some people will vote for pride and protest for some things, but not all. People don't necessarily have loyalty to these two big ideas.
Sure.
But when it comes to 78ers, I think what we have to acknowledge about it as well is that when 78 happens, people could have been there for any reason. And so, because they were there when the street march happened and then the riot happened, I have to acknowledge that, many people were there to protest, but, how involved or how not involved they may have been in the politics of it, it's a protest. Anyone can come along. And then to have this moment of being brutalized by the police, and then living with that legacy for the rest of your life, almost 50 years, that's a deep trauma that affects them. And I think a lot of people over that time have obviously seen a huge amount of progress that came out from that moment. And I think that they look back on it and they say, this is what we've achieved over this period of time. And I think sometimes seeing people that have had some change, but not as much change in their lifetime as they want to, especially young people, that they may not necessarily understand or empathize with that when their experience has been different in that regard.
Particularly when it comes to trans rights, right? Like we are seeing an intergenerational schism around trans people's, for some obviously, trans people's place in this whole debate and what it means. And heartbreakingly, we have some queer elders who just don't get it, right? And sometimes it feels like they don't want to try to get it, and are actively organising against the interests, having gone through so much shit themselves. It's one of the saddest things I ever see, I think, in our community. Elder queer people have been through so much shit, not being prepared to recognise exactly that same oppression coming to our trans siblings today. And that is a schism and a fight that is certainly not just restricted to the world of Mardi Gras, but feels particularly depressing in that context, I suppose.
Yeah. You have to be careful with that stuff, and you just have to try to communicate it as best as you can. But then also at some point you've just got to say, like, this is our fight now. Like at some point you have to say, like, this is our time to actually be the ones to lead and say what the agenda should be going forward, right? Yeah. And I think and I hope that that's what Pride and Protest do.
Totally.
Yeah.
Here's Josh Taylor in The Guardian summarising things. Pride in Protest is against the involvement of corporations and police in the event, while Protect Mardi Gras argues that excluding corporations and police would turn Mardi Gras into a space for division. Ding, ding, ding. Division. I love division.
Social cohesion.
Social cohesion, please.
What a that.
Inclusion, I heard you talk again on that podcast about the weaponization of inclusion, which I think is so interesting too, right? Like, of course, we want everyone, we want to be inclusive. But when that term is used to say the cops should march in this parade, given what that institution means to queer people, and given, and I can't believe that people can't see this, given what the cops are doing right now, like literally 2 weeks ago, bashing in, punching on the ground, people protesting a genocide, pulling up Muslim men peacefully praying, like Hannah Thomas, the Greens candidate, almost losing a fucking eye because she's trying to stop a fucking genocide going on. Like, how can people seriously not see that in the city of Sydney and recognise the continuing role of the police as an institution by the state to suppress dissent and people standing up for what is right? I mean, come on.
Yeah. And the thing that you have to ask is that when people make that support, like they either have two feelings. I think there's one, and I think that we shouldn't discount that there are plenty of people in the queer community that feel this way, that they kind of are happy that protesters get their head kicked in. Do you know? It's like because if they see this kind of thing and they don't agree with the political position, they do actually feel more strongly in support of the police and maintaining order in the city than they do any queer people that might have been at those protests themselves, which I was there. It was quite horrible. But then on the other side, I think you have these people who say, well, yes, those police do that, but our beautiful gay lesbian police would never do something like that because they're beautiful, precious angels and we love them, and they're also going to change everything. They also are just going to make everything so good and so great in the police force, and you just have to wait until that happens. And I think the unfortunate things for both those groups of people is that I don't think that there would have to be something so monumentally shocking for them to happen with the police for them to change their mind. And I think one of the things that would have to happen is that they would actually have to feel that somehow maybe their personal safety was under threat of the police, but they honestly don't belong in those category of people most of the time. And I think that's why they're so comfortable making that argument. But I want to go back onto this thing about inclusion that you said and the weaponization of it. And the most insane thing about this group of people is that when they use the term inclusion, they are exclusively using it for this group of people. They actually don't use the word inclusion to describe how they feel about other groups of people needing or wanting to be included. It is exclusively used to say that inclusion, basically, when you hear them talk about it, it's unidirectional. It is the inclusion that the queer community makes for groups that actively oppress them. And that's the only time that they talk about it. I would challenge anyone to find media statements where they actually are talking about another group that isn't politicians, cops, and corporations.
Yes. Well, New South Wales Teachers Federation. Sorry.
They're also not people. Like sorry. I mean, I don't mean the people inside it aren't people. I mean the institutions are not actually people. Like people should be included. People. Yes. But these are institutions. These are banners. These are things that are bigger than that. They're power structures.
Yeah. I mean, again, it all comes back to this idea of like, what do we think Mardi Gras is? What is it about? Is it a protest or is it a cultural event? Peter Murphy on that podcast said Mardi Gras is a cultural event, not a march down the street with megaphones. Which again, that's coming from a 78er is pretty extraordinary. I suppose from some people's perception, they see it as an evolution, right? We had this protest in 78. Now we've had all this celebration. We kept marching, and it is the explosion of popularity of Mardi Gras is a sign of its success and a sign of progress, right? And in fact, yes, it has evolved from a march, a protest, into a parade, right? And obviously the New South Wales government doesn't consider it a protest, otherwise they'd fucking shut it down. But I mean, yeah, do you think, like, is Mardi Gras in 2026 a protest? Do you think that's what it is, or is the mission of Pride and Protest, I suppose, to turn it into one or turn it back into one?
Yeah. I think what the question that we're more concerned about is that how is it a point for change and a change for better for people, and how things create change is not always in this idea of protest or not, right? It's like when we look at Mardi Gras, this really shocking first Mardi Gras that happened, it was really important for them to do it. The second year, that was a big political win and stuff. But it's literally not just the event itself that makes political change happen. Of course not. It's like it is this ongoing year-round work that happens where pressures are put on governments to say that the following things need to happen. So in order for that to happen, we need to make sure that our community is not being taken advantage of, right? Is not actually put in this position where we are given less power or we are supposed to be subservient to these larger powers. And, it's like all cultural events have their own politics as well.
Yes.
And there's a very worrying trend in Australia, especially under Labor governments, where they say if there's some element of a cultural event that they think crosses a line that they're not satisfied, like in South Australia and the Rise Festival, we saw them totally willing to be like, this thing will not happen, And it's because they crossed one of the lines that is against what the policy and what the objects of the Labor Party is. And I think if people saw any of the recent debate that happened in New South Wales Parliament recently, where one of the gay liberals is going off saying about how Mardi Gras should be defunded, you can see this same dynamic evolving, right? They actually don't want the organisation to be taking on opinions or having even proximity to opinions that they don't like.
Having any political content. This motherfucker, what's his name? Chris
any
Rath.
political content as well. Yeah, Chris Rath.
Right. He's a New South Wales Liberal frontbencher. He's called on the Mins to review funding to basically defund it because it's being hijacked by left-wing extremists. What should be a major tourism attraction for Sydney is being hijacked by left-wing extremists. Now, this is a gay man. He said he's marching Mardi Gras or whatever. But that made me laugh so much. It's like, does this motherfucker, has he read any history at all? Is he aware that the first Mardi Gras was started by literal communists? Like, yes, people have lots of different political traditions, but mainly literal fucking communists who were explicitly anti-capitalist and tied that struggle for liberation for queer people into the struggle against the oppressive forces of capitalism. Have you read a single book about this, mate?
Yeah, it's embarrassing. It's like a Martin Luther King kind of thing where Republicans be like, actually, he says what we believe, that kind of thing. It's embarrassing, but it's also an indictment on the way that I think people can think about Mardi Gras and think about Pride parades to think that it's so easily dominated. And this is what we've been going on for a long time about, is that we shouldn't let this happen. We are the ones that are in control of it. And so, yeah, it should be our agenda. It should be our agenda.
Now, you say you're in control of it, but the Mardi Gras board has some different opinions. And this is what really, was so galling.
We should
should be in charge of it. But no, turns out in January this year, not so much. Okay, so the AGM, and if people don't know, it's a membership organisation. So anyone can become a member of Mardi Gras, and then you can go along to the AGM. You can vote for certain motions. You can also pass on your vote to other people to be a proxy, to vote on your behalf. If you hate meetings and can't be bothered going, which you shouldn't do. You should be an active member. But so you have this AGM in November. A whole bunch of motions are passed. And then in January, the board comes out and says, yeah, actually, we're not going to do that. Can you explain a little bit more about what these motions were and the board's logic in saying that they will not be actually following the prescriptions of motions that were passed in a democratic process at the AGM?
Yeah, so at the AGM, Pride and Protest put up a number of motions. There are also some other motions from other people. 5 motions won in total. 3 of ours were successful.
Mm-hmm.
One was trans rights, not Trump. It essentially said that the organisation will boycott any company that is materially contributing towards the Trump regime because of their extreme transphobia. And that also, as part of that process, that floats should be encouraged to share messages of trans rights for the parade this year. The second one was that basically politicians should receive a letter from Mardi Gras saying that they need to act on anti-discrimination reform in a timely manner. That's for New South Wales State and for federal. And if they don't act on it in a timely manner or give promises that there will be anti-discrimination reform, that they would not be welcome at the parade this year. The third one was a motion that concerned public funding. So is that the organisation should pursue 100% public funding, and that also passed. Now, when the board came back in January...
And sorry, just to clarify, Charlie, that's not drop all corporate sponsorships tomorrow. That is to pursue, over the long term, to move toward a funding model in which Mardi Gras doesn't have to go to corporate sponsors to exist and could be publicly funded.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
So the board came back and they said, well, all of these motions, 3 of 5 of them we decided not to act on. And it just so happens that the 3 that they decided not to were the ones that Pride and Protest put up, despite that we had won a majority of the room, over 1,000 members voting. So this is one of the biggest, legitimately one of the biggest member organisations that has this form of grassroots democracy. And they turned around and said that we're not going to do it. The reason why they gave that, they said that the company would essentially be put at too much risk if they did that, and they can't act on things that are going to put the company in risk. What that risk is quite unclear. When it came to encouraging people in the floats to share messages of trans rights, they said if we were to encourage people to do that, that would be an imposition. It would be an imposition on floats that we don't make because we want people to have their own creative freedom when it comes to their float, despite the fact that it was not mandatory, but it was saying because this motion had been passed, that we think that messages of trans rights should be encouraged for this year.
Jesus Christ. What if someone wants to do a transphobic message? Like, we can't tell them not to do that. That would be ridiculous.
We would never stop them from doing that.
These creatives, man, you can't get in the way of their process. They come up with some really great drawings and you just got to let them do their thing.
Yeah. Any creative would kill to have that kind of management. Just be like, you know what? Whatever you're doing, I love it. I had no notes. You can do whatever you want.
Oh, God.
So, yes. So there's been a lot of drama that has ensued from that. The board members that had been elected from Pride and Protest over the past 2 years were responding to an email campaign that was encouraging the board to pass these motions. When they wrote back with messages of support of these people who were saying that it would be pro-trans to pass these motions. They were then censured on that basis. The trans member of the board in that censure motion was misgendered in that process. She's a trans woman and they used he, him pronouns for her in that. So there has been quite rightly a lot of concern from trans people to say, like, the reaction that you as a board have had to people saying that trans rights should be encouraged for this year, and also that anti-discrimination protections, which are needed on a federal level, especially quite heavily because of what's happening in different states at the moment with the restriction of trans healthcare, for them to come back and say, no, we're not going to pass that, and also misgender a board member and discipline her in the process, people have been like, that's pretty fucked. That is transphobic. Yes. And, you know, when it comes to...
I just want to say, like, I'm sure as a trans person, you're dealing with pronoun shit on a very regular basis, and that must be, well, dehumanizing and very annoying in lots of other contexts. But I think especially coming from the fucking board of Mardi Gras to not expect a basic level of respect and consistency on that particular front, I think must have been, yes, a particular twist of the knife that would have been very frustrating.
And written, you know, it's like in writing, you know, it's like you at least have one process of editing before you send it, and in a motion that is punishing you, you know, as well. It's yeah, it's all pretty sad.
And so how can they do this? I mean, how can a board have a process in which you get members to vote on motions, those motions are passed through a democratic process, and then the board can seriously turn around and say, nah, computer says no, we're not going to do that.
Yeah, and the thing is, it shows that they just have so much contempt for the community. You know, it shows that, and this is what this kind of battle over the soul of Mardi Gras is actually about. Is it's like when it comes to the actual nitty gritty of people saying and declaring what they want, who is actually listened to in the end? And people might have seen on Instagram, but that. Anthony Albanese was at Fair Day, and he was taking plenty of happy snaps there. And in his photos, the co-chair of Mardi Gras was there as well. Now, the Labor Party had already been sent in previous years letters saying that they needed to act on queer rights, but it had been explicitly this year said that that was not going to happen. Right. And the reason why it was done in the service of him having this photo shoot. And this is a man who has said that I am not a woman, that during the election debates is up on the election stage with Scott Morrison and them together at the same time, both saying that the definition of a woman is an adult human female. This is a turf dog whistle to say that trans women are not women. He feels totally comfortable in saying that. And the board and the members of the board who are in the Labor Party are totally comfortable with that. They want him there because he is their man. They work for him.
Yeah. Yeah, wow. Yeah. Front page of the Daily Telegraph. I remember Joe Hildebrand, non-woke elbow. Can men get pregnant? No. It just him just the way he just shrugs us off being like, oh, is that a culture war talking point? I don't know. Like, yeah, fucking hell. Also a government that has walked away from laws that they said they were going to pass to protect our community and racial discrimination. And the reason is he was waiting for bipartisan support from Peter fucking Dutton to respect our rights. This is the level of commitment from this federal Labor Party to protecting LGBTQ plus people. And you're right, just gets a beautiful happy snap at Mardi Gras, and the board loves it because, hey, it's the Prime Minister at our big party. What a win, And the reason, we get this big, as members, we get this big email from the board, right? And the board says that we weren't going to follow that particular resolution about disinviting politicians at the parade because we want to ensure the parade participation for public figures is not used as leverage for political outcomes. Why the fuck not? But that's almost not all you have, but that's a pretty big thing. Like, that is really one of the major key things that Mardi Gras actually has in terms of affecting political change, placing some conditions on the idea. You want to come and get the happy snaps, you want to endorse our community, fucking do something for it. And we're not just going to turn away if you don't. We're not just going to throw all our political leverage out the window there.
And aren't they using it for political leverage? Like, is it about who has the permission to use it for political leverage?
Yes.
And, all these people say it's like, even if these people don't agree with us, we're having the conversations. It's like, you're not having a conversation with him while he's there. He is showing up for the time that he needs to. He is coming with his security and the police surrounding him. No one is having a fucking conversation with him about anti-discrimination form. If you're lucky, the street interviewer for the ABC will ask one question that is not a softball question that there will be a non-answer to. And the way that people talk about having people inside the tent is that one of the most obvious things about Mardi Gras was like, didn't all the major wins at the start of Mardi Gras when it was first born, didn't that happen without any of these people there? Yes, political wins are possible without having them there. That should be obvious. I mean, they really are more possible when they aren't there. In our opinion, and history proves us to be right. And I just want to ask those people, like, show me the scoreboard, show me the actual scoreboard of having these people participate, of actually winning these things and pushing them forward.
Man, that reminds me of a moment from this play, The Normal Heart. Ned Weeks, who's the Larry Kramer stand-in, they're lobbying, they're trying to get a meeting with the mayor to get the city to take the AIDS crisis seriously, and he pisses a lot of people off. He's very aggressive. He's constantly calling out people on their bullshit. He's demanding better.
and they finally get the meeting with the mayor, and Ned Weeks' character is told you can't come. You're too much of a liability because you turn people off. And he just goes, how'd you get the fucking meeting? You got the meeting because I was a fucking bulldog and I did not let up and I fought like crazy and I didn't put up with anything or accept any half measures. That's how you actually got in the room. Now that we've got this meeting, I'm on the outer and it all needs to be nice, smiles and slowly sort of centrism,
Yeah. Yep. That's a familiar feeling.
This is it. I mean, that was the crazy thing of this play. It's like, oh, this rings a lot of bells. What can Pip do about this? I heard talk about calling an extraordinary meeting. I mean, obviously Mardi Gras is about to happen. Things aren't going to stop before this year's festival, which is on right now as we speak. But yes, what can be done? Is there any way to challenge this pretty anti-democratic decision for the Mardi Gras board?
Yeah. So Pride and Protest have started a petition for an extraordinary general meeting. We've basically said that these motions need to be followed through. If it's not going to happen this year, for the years going forward, it needs to happen. There needs to be some clear, concrete action based on the spirit of these motions to happen from the organisation, because that grassroots democracy cannot be ignored. So that petition is available if people want to sign it. People can just go to the Pride and Protest Instagram. They can find it there. You can also become a member and then sign up to it. And essentially what the meeting will call for is for those motions to go through, to be enacted, for the board's decision to be reversed, for the board to take seriously the fact that them denying those motions is an act that is against the will of trans people, and that those motions are looking at pushing trans rights forward. And the other part of the motion is that if they don't accept those things, that the co-chairs should be removed from their positions. So then there is removal motions for them to go. So you can sign the petition, but you have to be a member. So if you're already currently a member, go sign the petition. If you're not, you can go sign up through the Mardi Gras website and then sign the petition there.
Now, you see what you did there, Charlie? That's entryism. Encouraging people to join this organisation. That is against the rules. It should be very small and controlled. And the membership shouldn't actually do anything. They should pay their dues and shut the fuck up. Yeah. All right. Just finally on the Mardi Gras thing, we might have some time to go to some bigger issues too. But the party, of course. This was another big story that broke, that there will be no after party this year. This happens at the end of the parade. Everyone goes down to Hordern Pavilion. Everyone sits around, reads the Bible, shares some stories, has a nice lemonade. Goons to share, in my experience. It's in Saturday. I've had some fantastic nights at the Mardi Gras after party. Lots of people enjoy it, but it was announced that it is not happening in 2026. The chief executive of Mardi Gras, Jesse Matheson, announced the heartbreaking cancellation of the party. Mardi Gras had run at a significant financial loss for the past 2 years, he said, and the party had run at a deficit since 2020. So a little bit hard to understand. Mardi Gras brought in Kix and Bizarro, who are two subsidiaries of the entertainment giant Live Nation, to help run the party in previous years. The one surplus that was reported was apparently due to American Express providing its sponsorship funds early after deciding to end its principal sponsor status with Mardi Gras ahead of schedule. Then we have other reports saying that, of course, Pride and Protest have said that we don't like Kix and Bizarro generally. We don't like Live Nation because they did become a target of the BDS movement when the Instagram account for Live Nation Israel expressed support for the IDF on the 7th of October 2023. So I suppose, yes, can you give us an insight into the real story here? Why is the party not happening this year? How much did BDS considerations play into that? And what's really going on?
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing about bringing up the BDS stuff was essentially Pride and Protest saying, you have an ethical charter which says that you cannot partner with people who are showing this support for the genocide. So we were just essentially saying that this partnership shouldn't go ahead. And then suddenly, while we're in the process of saying that the partnership shouldn't go ahead, then the actual event got cancelled. Right. So even if we were going to do something about it, we can't now because the party does not exist. Mm-hmm. And I think there is a larger issue that's going on, especially for festivals in Australia and New South Wales is that they're shutting down. Like there are lots and lots of festivals that are shutting down. And I do actually have some empathy with the fact that like it's harder and harder to put on a commercial event. And for the Mardi Gras party, you know, there's lots of different things that are happening with it. You know, Mardi Gras party has always been very concentrated into a male audience, into a circa gay audience. Over time, different kinds of parties have popped up around that. Other competitors to the party have come up as well. You know, circa gays can go to other places that are big parties. It's harder and harder for Mardi Gras to secure an international act, those kinds of things. I think it is essentially right to say that actually like, you know, that it's becoming less and less commercially viable for them to do it, and also that it's becoming less and less relevant. And that if there is to be really large parties as part of Mardi Gras, like they should be publicly funded. Like imagine if we had a giant free outdoor concert that was sponsored by the state government. It would be incredible. I went to this incredible festival in Barcelona where it was just free concerts, free stages all around the city. And there was just masses and masses and masses of people. You know, to actually kickstart Mardi Gras in that way and to actually give back and say like, let's make this a really, really big public festival and a big free festival could be a great solution, because it's clear that Mardi Gras have taken a you know, a cheap way out and saying we're just going to outsource our event. But part of the problem with outsourcing events is that, you know, those larger companies, they don't give a fuck about, you know, the cultural importance of an event. If they look at their balance sheet and they say, well, this one can go and this one can stay, that actually their ability to be like, yeah, no, we don't actually want to put it on, then they can just make that decision. So we really need something that is in the hands of us and for us to make the decision on. And so, yeah, maybe it is time for a party that looks different.
Looks different. I mean, I did always think, again, I saw Cher headlining. I don't think I saw Kylie. I forget the other ones I've seen. And they've had some massive lines. Troye Sivan did one year and stuff. And it's all good. It's just like, guys, you could just put on a CD. You could just put on a video. People are in a really good mood, both for genuine joyous reasons and also because of some chemical assistance. And they'll have a great time regardless. As long as the music is loud and sort of gay, I don't think you need to pay huge amounts of money to a headliner to have a good time. I'm not saying it's the only way to do it, but there are lots of ways we can have an amazing time.
I agree with that. And then, but also part of that is that you need like a lot of good community will to make that happen, you know? It's like before, you know, earlier in Mardi Gras history when it's like, it's a fundraiser, you know, it's like part of you going to the party was this sense of feeling like I'm giving back to the community.
Right.
You know, people felt good by that. It's like, hey, I can go and have a good time with whoever to whatever music, and I know that I'm doing this to keep Mardi Gras going. But actually, Mardi Gras having that ask of people, like they no longer have it. I mean, look at how they treat the membership. It's like they take the membership's money, but if they do something they don't like, they'll be like, "Fuck off." It's like I'm giving you money for nothing. I'm just giving you money so I can vote and have a say. You know, it's like I think Mardi Gras need to see the community as someone who is invested in and backs them, rather than seeing them as consumers. Yeah.
Am I a dreamer? Am I a dreamer?
Well, God bless, or whatever you believe in, bless Pride and Protest, and hopefully the fight and struggle for a more radical, more just and more democratic Mardi Gras continues. And I hope people could still have fun at the festival regardless. Just want to ask you about one other thing. This was sort of a guest essay in the New York Times by Professors Charlesworth and Finkel last month. It's called "Americans Are Turning Against Gay People." And basically, there's a bit of social science research that is finding that, according to this article, the decades-long rise in the acceptance of gay people in the United States peaked around 2020 and has sharply reversed then.
So this is research that was published in 2022 that sort of showed the decline of anti-gay bias, and there's like 7.1 million responses from Americans collected over a 13-year period from 2007 to 2020. And they sort of asked, whether people associate gay with being good or bad. How do you prefer straight people over gay people? These kind of pretty brutal questions. But anyway, they just found this constant decline in that kind of bias. Almost every US state, every demographic group declined by roughly 75% or 65%. And the modelling suggested that anti-gay bias could hit zero as early as 2022. We could be at net zero homophobia by 2022. 22, which is pretty cool.
Jeez.
Anyway, plot twist, that's not happening. Around a couple of years later, additional analysis of an additional 2.5 million responses from Americans collected from the beginning of 2021 through to 2024 revealed that progress had not only stalled, it had reversed. In just 4 years, anti-gay bias rose by around 10%. Perhaps most surprising is that these trends were distinctly robust among the youngest American adults, those under 25. This group increased its animus against marginalised groups in general and gay people in particular at a faster rate than older Americans did. Also surprising is that although anti-gay bias has risen faster among conservatives, it has also risen among liberals. Now, America's America. America's got a lot of wild stuff going on. And thankfully, in many ways, Australia is unlike America, but that does feel like it's changing sometimes. I mean, I'm just interested in your thoughts on that, reflecting that across the board. The anti-woke backlash, of course, this horrific war and assault on our trans siblings that continues, and the idea of trans rights seems to be mainstreaming across the board. I personally know some trans friends who have moved back from America to Australia because it's just not safe. What do you put this down to, this rising homophobia and queerphobia and transphobia, even amongst young people who are supposed to be more progressive than the people who came before?
Yeah, I think you're right in that it is culture specific, because like young people have different trends of support. Like in the Anglosphere, it's like in the US, a lot of young people have turned to the right, but in the UK, you see a lot of young people have actually turned to the Greens parties there. So it's like there are specific political conditions that are going on that mean people have these kinds of realignments. But I think in America, particularly, the way that you have seen anti-trans attacks happen is that the collection of issues that conservatives have about trans people, there are so many ways in which they have a connection towards gay people and the things that matter to gay people that are inescapable. When you see TERFs, for example, talk about trans people, something else that they also talk a lot about is surrogacy. They don't support surrogacy, but despite the fact that we know that surrogates are predominantly, overwhelmingly used by straight people, is that all of the TERFs content, all of the TERFs criticism about surrogacy comes down to their criticism of gay men using it. And so they kind of, in the same way that they like, in that they isolate, problems affecting women to, being trans women on the other side of it, they do the same thing of being like surrogacy. Oh, these are the only people that quote unquote are, taking babies from women or, enslaving women's wombs. It's ridiculous. Things like that. And ultimately what it comes down to is like, it is an uncomfortability with the fact that people have an expression that is outside of heteronormativity, and that, essentially the family unit, for example, that men shouldn't be occupying this role of a maternal role, that it's not natural that a gay man has a child or brings up a child, that a child necessarily needs a mother. They will always make these connections between groups, and I think there are some gay people that think that they can exist outside that that criticism. Luckily, there are many, especially gay men who don't think that, and lesbians by far. There was some polling coming out of the UK that said lesbians on average approve of trans people more than trans people approve of themselves. So lesbians, it's like there was more trans people being like, I don't support trans people than when lesbians were polled. So thank you to all the lesbians.
I thought that was just Caitlyn Jenner and Kate McGregor. I thought that was they were the only ones. But no, fucking yes.
Yeah. No, but you know, the thing with gay men is that gay men have things like drag, or that gay men, many gay men have are very comfortable with a feminine expression or want to have a feminine expression, and then they receive the same. I mean, it is a form of transphobia in a way, is that homophobia and transphobia are interchangeable when the target of it, or the point of it, is to say, like, the fact that you were born a man, and that you have decided to act like a woman, their feeling is essentially like, you've just said that being a man is shit or whatever, or that like, or they're like, I hate women, and how dare you think that being a woman or being feminine is better than being a man. And as long as there are gay people, you know, they also have that variety of gender expression. Lesbians have a variety of gender expressions as well. You know, these lines between being trans and also gender expression of gay and lesbian people, those very fuzzy borders, that's actually where a lot of, you know, especially for me when I was a gay man, being able to explore that and being surrounded by a community that let me explore that meant that I eventually could express my trans identity. And so because we are so connected in that way, when you have a backlash against trans people, it will affect gays and lesbians and bisexual people in that way, because we do share a lot of those expressions. And that is something that homophobes and transphobes don't accept either way. And really, in the mind of a homophobe and a transphobe, like what do they fundamentally think is the difference between a trans woman and a gay man? They actually don't make the distinction. They just see someone and they see that, in my mind, is a fucking man who's acting in a way that I don't approve of.
And we've seen it, right? Like some people, and I've seen this in my life, both online and people I know, starting out being like, oh, just asking questions, not sure about that, and what about sport, and what about women-only spaces? And they go on this kind of pipeline that sometimes ends up with them marching alongside fucking neo-Nazis on the streets, or signing up to a broader right-wing, Islamophobic as hell, Zionist, white supremacist worldview. It's pretty extraordinary how a lot of people seem to go down that path, and their entry into it is stuff around trans rights.
Yeah.
Just finally, in terms of some explanations from the authors of this guest essay in the New York Times, they write, if asked to speculate on the cause of the rise of anti-gay prejudice, we would point to two related factors. The first is social instability. Starting around 2020, the United States experienced a sustained disruption consisting of the COVID pandemic, economic strain, and intensifying political conflict, each of which has been linked to heightened intergroup hostility and scapegoating. The second factor, which would explain the rise in specifically in anti-gay bias, is anti-establishment sentiment. I thought you'd be interested in this. The sustained social disruption since 2020 has fueled resentment and a loss of confidence in institutions perceived to have failed. Governments, corporations, the broader establishment. By 2020, support for gay and lesbian equality had become an establishment position. Corporate America, for example, demonstrated a concrete commitment to gay rights, with companies donating hundreds of thousands of dollars for pride celebrations and other efforts at gay and lesbian inclusion. Now, we might quibble a little bit about how much, you know, the ruling class fully endorsed something like trans rights in 2020, but I think there is some truth to that, right? This corporate rainbow, the woke capital that we hear a lot about, a position that has been immediately abandoned in the second term of Trump's America. Like, we've just heard how people be like, oh yeah, fuck all that shit. We don't care about any of that. But yeah, that's interesting. Like, again, associating
liberal values or, more progressive, open-ended values of acceptance of lots of people with the establishment and the status quo. And then once the status quo is so horrific and awful and people turn against that, some of the victims of that are our community or marginalised people who, for a brief window, got some shallow support from these motherfuckers. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, I do. I do think it's true. And this is the thing. It's like when it's especially for woke capital take on these positions, it's like it's not helpful on that basis, because it's like the only thing that you associate when you see Coles being part of Mardi Gras is like, oh, that's the place where I spend a fucking $150 on groceries, and I can eat for 2 days. That it's not helpful. And the other part of it is that there is this loss of spaces in which people are able to maybe have conversations that are political conversations that can be difficult, but they're actually contained in an institution where you have a relative equality with the person that you're having that conversation with. And also that person has gone out and they've made the ability to argue with that as an equal, as opposed to just seeing a message which you see as indistinguishable from advertising.
Yes.
And comes from a place that's either for you looks like advertising or propaganda. But whereas when we're part of institutions that are actually grassroots, and I'm not talking about activist groups and stuff that is relatively small. I'm talking about conversations that people can have in unions. Conversations that people can have in sporting groups, for example, is really important. When it comes to trans people in sports, actually the way that this stuff is moving along, and there is a lot of tension within it and difficult conversations that are being had at the moment, but because they're coming from a position where the person speaking to you about their rights is someone who's directly affected by it, it's much, much harder to push that away and to not have the conversation. Whereas when you see, when you see Albo marching, ANZ, Albo marching down the fucking parade route.
Yeah. And again, I'll say this before, with woke capital, you're totally right. Maybe the left and right can agree that is bullshit and we should reject it, right? But the answer is not to hate gay people. Hate the bank, all right? If you see the gay TM, hate the bank. You don't hate the gay people, because that's the simplest thing. That's the reactionary response to that. You say, you're totally right. This is a corporation making a very cynical attempt to adopt progressive values to try and sell you some shit. So hate them, but don't get angry at Charlie and me. We're really nice.
It's a pretty poor excuse from those people, It's like when BLM happened and then there was all those corporations, I was like, well, black people, no, I don't support them because fucking whoever said, I don't even know, the Coca-Cola companies were supporting them.
Very true. All right. So good to talk to you again, Charlie. Happy Mardi Gras. I hope you enjoy it. I hope, despite everything, we're able to still celebrate the good and hang on to it. And I have so much respect for the work that you and Pride and Protest are doing to try and win back a more radical, more just Mardi Gras. How can people get involved if they're listening to this? If they're in Sydney or outside of Sydney, how can they support the work you're doing?
Yeah, follow Pride and Protest on Instagram. If you're in Sydney, there's a number of things that we do in person. So please come along to those. There'll be the Trans Day of Visibility rally that will be happening at the end of March. Please join that, our rally in Newtown, to support and push forward trans rights. And like I'd said before, if you are really interested in being part of the democracy of Mardi Gras, or preserving, or maybe even instituting democracy in Mardi Gras, please become a member and get in contact with Pride and Protest to say that you've become a member so we can keep you updated.
What do you think of democracy at Mardi Gras? I think it would be a wonderful idea.
Yeah. But otherwise, see you at Mardi Gras. Woo! See you at the party.
Thanks, Charlie. Have fun.
Thank you, Tom.